Support for this episode is provided by Rockler Woodworking and Hardware. Create with confidence. And Sashko's Big Stretch Caulking. Caulking that won't crack, it just stretches. Sashko makes products that work. Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in. This is part 3 of the Kitchen Pantry project, and I'll have links to all the videos related to this project in the description below. In this episode, we're going to build the base. We'll attach the drawer fronts to the drawers. We'll attach the drawer hardware, and then finally install the cabinets. I get started on the base by first ripping all the material to width, and I'm using 3/4 inch birch plywood simply because these are cut-offs from another project. But you could also use 2x4 material, really whatever you have hanging around the shop. After ripping the parts to width, I'll set up a stop block on the miter saw and cut everything to length. Now with all the parts cut to size, I'll measure and mark to pre-drill and countersink holes. To build the frame, I'll tack the parts in place first using the nail gun, and then I'll use a few screws for a little more strength. For the top of the base, I'm using 1/2 inch birch plywood, and again, these are some cutoffs that I had in the shop, and this is just a good way to use them up. I'm making the drawer fronts out of 3/4 inch birch plywood, and I make the fronts a 1/2 inch taller than the drawer opening height and a full inch wider than the drawer opening width. To hide the end grain of the plywood, I'll use iron-on edge banding. After sanding and priming the drawer fronts, I'm ready to drill the holes for the drawer hardware. To attach the drawer pulls, I made this simple jig. It's a board that measures the same width as the drawer fronts. It has a center line drawn down the middle, and I've drilled holes in the appropriate places for the hardware that I'm using. To use the jig, I make a mark on the center of the drawer at each side. Then I'll line up the mark that's on the jig with the mark that's on the drawer front, clamp the jig in place, and drill the holes. To attach the drawer fronts, I start with the bottom drawer and I measure up on the face frame 1/4 inch on each side. Then I'll measure over on one side of the face frame 1/2 inch, make a mark, make 2 marks. I've already pre-drilled holes in the drawer and then countersunk the holes from the inside. Now I'll hold the drawer front at the 1/4 inch line that I marked on the rail and the 1/2 inch line that I marked on the stile. I'll hold it in place with 2 squeeze clamps and then attach the drawer front with 4 screws. For the second drawer, I'll use a piece of 3/4 inch plywood as a spacer. Drop the drawer front on the spacer and move it over to the lines that I marked on the stiles. Clamp the drawer front in place and attach it with 4 screws from behind. For the top drawer, I'll just repeat the same process. To attach the drawer pulls, I'll drill through the holes that I already drilled through the drawer fronts. The hardware that I'm using is the 3 3/4 Hopewell bar pull from Rockler with a polished nickel finish. Now I'm ready to install the cabinets. I get started by leveling the platform on the floor, and then I'll attach the 1/2-inch plywood top to the platform with a few 1 1/4 screws. It's not uncommon for the walls to be a little off, so here I'm using a drawing compass to scribe a line on the side of the cabinet. I'll use a jigsaw to cut the scribe line, and then use a hand plane to fine-tune the cut. For the next cabinet, I'll take a measurement from the top and bottom and mark a cut line on the side of the cabinet that meets the wall. I'll connect the lines with a straight edge and again use a jigsaw to make the cut. With both cabinets fit in place, I'll use cabinet clamps to clamp the cabinets together and then permanently connect the cabinets with screws. It's not uncommon to run into some kind of a problem when you're installing cabinets, and in this case I had to remove the door casing in order to fit the drawers. I also had to remove the drawer fronts, and it was still a tight fit, but in the end it all worked out. But it was a close one, and I was stressing there for a second. I did have a pretty nice tight scribe on the cabinets, but I always like to run a bead of caulking up the seam as a last step. I bought the wooden countertop with me so I could scribe it into place and then bring it back to the shop for sanding and finishing. To fit the countertop, first I make a pattern with 1/8-inch plywood and a drawing compass. I then trace the pattern onto the countertop and make the cut with a jigsaw. This worked out really well, and the countertop has a nice tight fit. I'll go into the making, finishing, and installation of the countertop in the next video. And once that video is posted, I'll make sure there's a link to the video in the description. Okay, well, that went pretty smooth. A few little hiccups here and there, but in the end, everything worked out and the drawers fit. I wasn't worried about removing the door casing because I'll be replacing the door and window casing in that room, along with adding wainscoting and chair rail and maybe even crown molding. I think that little room is going to look really nice when it's done. My first video for 2018 will be finishing and installing, or building, finishing, and installing the countertop. And this is my last video for 2017, and I really want to thank everybody for tuning in each week, leaving comments, hitting the thumbs up button. It's been a huge motivator for me to want to make better videos, better projects, and I think 2018 is going to be even better. So I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holiday, and a healthy New Year. And as always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.